Tavi Body here, the only body, the baddest. Check out Freaky Girl out on all platforms right now. Also check out Grimm's Promotion on Instagram for all your artists, marketing, and managing promotions, and many more. Freaky Girl make you happy in a life. Freaky Girl make us balance wife.
It's 4:30 a.m. on May 30th, 2023. Somewhere in Atlanta, a man stares at his phone screen, watching a small car icon move through the streets of Buckhead. He's tracking his friend Tisha's Uber ride home, a feature most of us use to feel safer, to know our loved ones made it back okay. The little dot moves along Lindbergh Drive, just like it should. Then it stops. At first, he probably thinks nothing of it. Maybe a red light, maybe traffic. But seconds turn into minutes. The icon stays frozen in the same spot, unmoving. Something's wrong. What this man didn't know, what he couldn't know from that innocent-looking app on his screen, was that he had just witnessed the final moments of Tasha Bruley's life. That motionless dot wasn't a traffic delay. It was the exact location where multiple gunmen had just unleashed 40 rounds of ammunition into her Uber, turning what should have been a 3-minute ride home into a targeted execution. This isn't just another story about violence in America. This is about how modern technology made one person an unwitting witness to murder. How the very tools we use to feel connected and safe can become windows into our worst nightmares. And how sometimes watching from afar can be the most terrifying perspective of all. Tasha Bruley, known to her 40,000 Instagram followers as Tavi Baddie, was a 30-year-old Guyanese social media influencer who had just finished her shift at Allure Atlanta, a club in one of the city's most affluent neighborhoods. Buckhead isn't the kind of place where you expect military-style ambushes. It's where Atlanta's elite live, work, and play. Tree-lined streets, luxury high-rises, and the kind of security that comes with money. But money can't stop bullets. And on this particular Tuesday morning, Buckhead became a war zone. The attack lasted 20 seconds. 20 seconds of sustained gunfire that neighbors would later describe as sounding like a war was going on outside. 20 seconds that transformed a routine rideshare trip into a crime scene so brutal that seasoned police officers immediately classified it as a targeted hit. Here's what makes this case so haunting: the precision. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong or a crime of passion. Multiple someones followed Tisha's Uber in 2 separate vehicles. They knew her routine. They knew her route. They waited for the perfect moment to strike, just 1 block away from her home, just moments away from safety. The Uber driver survived without a scratch, not because he was lucky, but because he was never the target. Every single bullet was meant for the woman in the back seat, a woman whose biggest crime, according to everyone who knew her, was loving her daughter and working hard to build a life for them both. As of today, nearly 2 years later, no one has been arrested for Tasha's murder. The people who turned that Uber into a death trap are still out there. Still free. Still unknown. What kind of threat requires 40 shots to eliminate? What kind of secret was worth that level of violence? And why would anyone target a social media influencer whose friends and family insist she wouldn't hurt a fly? The answers to those questions died with Tasha that morning. But the evidence of what happened, the shell casings, the riddled vehicle, the terrified 911 calls, tells us this was no random act of violence. This was an execution. Professional, precise, absolutely ruthless. Before we go any further into this story, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching this from right now? And have you ever felt unsafe during a rideshare? Because after you hear what happened to Tisha, you might think twice about that late-night Uber home. Drop a comment and let me know. Your story might help others stay safe. To understand why Tasha Bruley's murder feels so senseless, you need to understand who she really was. Because the woman who died in that Uber wasn't just Tavi Baddie, the Instagram personality with over 40,000 followers. She wasn't just the OnlyFans creator or the aspiring musician who had started releasing her own tracks. She was Tasha, a daughter, a sister, and most importantly, a mother who would do anything for her little girl. Tasha's story began in Guyana, the small South American nation where she was born, before eventually making her way to Atlanta. Like so many immigrants, she came to America with dreams of building something better, something bigger than what she'd left behind. And in many ways, she succeeded. By her 30s, she had transformed herself into a digital entrepreneur, using social media platforms to create income streams and build a brand that resonated with thousands of people. Her Instagram account was a window into a life that many envied. Glamorous photos, expensive outfits, nights out at Atlanta's hottest clubs. She knew how to work the camera, how to engage with her audience, how to turn her personality into profit. On TikTok, she showcased her humor and creativity. Her OnlyFans account provided financial independence. She was even pursuing music, recording tracks and building a presence in Atlanta's competitive music scene. But here's what her followers didn't see in those posts. The bedtime stories she read to her daughter every night. The school events she never missed. The way her face would light up whenever someone mentioned her child. According to her friend Clarence, Tisha's love for her daughter wasn't just profound, it was the driving force behind everything she did. She was truly a good person, and innocent, Clarence remembered. It's a description that might surprise people who only knew Tisha through her online presence. In a world where social media often rewards controversy and drama, Tisha had managed to build a following while remaining, at her core, someone her friends described as genuinely kind. This wasn't someone living a double life or hiding dark secrets. This was a working mother who happened to make her living through social media and entertainment. She danced at Allure Atlanta, a club in Buckhead where she had built a community of friends and colleagues who genuinely cared about her. When she died, these weren't just co-workers mourning, they were people who had lost someone they considered family. The disconnect between Tisha's public persona and the violence that claimed her life becomes even starker when you hear from her brother. In the aftermath of her murder, he expressed complete bewilderment about who would want to harm his sister. This wasn't a family bracing for bad news or dealing with ongoing threats. This was a brother who couldn't comprehend why anyone would target Tisha. "I don't know anyone who would want to hurt her," he said. And the confusion in his voice was genuine. This wasn't someone trying to protect family secrets or dodge difficult questions about Tisha's life. This was a man who knew his sister well enough to be absolutely certain that she didn't have enemies capable of this level of violence. That confusion, that complete inability to understand the motive, is what makes this case so disturbing. When someone is murdered in what police call a targeted ambush, there's usually a reason. Drug debts, gang affiliations, business disputes, romantic entanglements gone wrong. Something that, while tragic, at least provides context for the violence. But Tisha's murder exists in a vacuum of motive. Here was a woman who worked hard, loved her daughter fiercely, and had built a successful online presence through her personality and work ethic. She wasn't involved in illegal activities. She wasn't connected to dangerous people. She was, by all accounts, exactly what her friend called her, innocent. This innocence makes the attack even more terrifying. Because if someone like Tisha, someone with no apparent enemies, no dangerous associations, no dark secrets could be targeted for execution-style murder, then what does that say about the rest of us? What invisible factors made her a target? What did she stumble into without knowing it? Her daughter, who was just a child when her mother was killed, will grow up with these same questions. Why was her mother taken from her? Who decided that Tisha's life was worth 40 bullets? And why has no one been held accountable for destroying their family? The woman behind Tavi Batty deserved better than becoming a statistic in Atlanta's homicide files. She deserved to see her daughter graduate, to continue building her career, to live the American dream she had worked so hard to achieve. Instead, she became the victim of a crime so senseless that even her own brother can't understand it. Tuesday, May 30th, 2023. The clock strikes 4:30 a.m. as Tisha finishes her shift at Allure Atlanta. The club is winding down, the music fading, the crowd thinning out. For Tisha, it's just another night's work coming to an end. She pulls out her phone and does what millions of people do every day. She opens the Uber app and requests a ride home. The driver assigned to her pickup is operating a black Cadillac Escalade. It's the kind of vehicle that suggests safety, luxury, comfort, As he pulls up to collect his passenger, neither he nor Tisha has any idea that they're about to become part of one of Atlanta's most brutal unsolved murders. Tisha climbs into the back seat, probably checking her phone, maybe texting friends about her night. The driver starts the engine and begins what should be a routine trip through Buckhead. But they're not alone on the road. Somewhere behind them, two cars have begun following the Escalade. This is where the timeline becomes crucial, because what happens next reveals the level of planning involved in Tasha's murder. The attackers didn't just happen upon her. They had been waiting. They knew when her shift ended. They knew which car she would be in. They knew the route she would take home. As the Uber turns onto Lindbergh Drive, heading toward the intersection with Piedmont Road, the pursuit intensifies. The driver later tells police that he noticed the two vehicles behind him, but at this point, he probably assumes it's just coincidental traffic. Late-night Atlanta can be busy, even at 4:30 a.m., but these aren't random cars sharing the road. These are hunters closing in on their prey. The Escalade continues down Lindbergh Drive, passing between Piedmont Road and Adena Drive. Tisha is now less than 1 block from her home, 1 block from safety. 1 block from kissing her daughter goodnight, even though it's already morning. She can probably see familiar landmarks out the window, the buildings she passes every day, the streets she knows by heart. Then the world explodes. The two pursuing vehicles pull alongside the Uber. What happens next is so violent, so sustained, that residents throughout the neighborhood will be awakened by what sounds like urban warfare. The attackers open fire, not with handguns or even single rifles, but with enough firepower to turn a luxury SUV into Swiss cheese. 40 shots. That's what witnesses estimate. 40 rounds of ammunition unleashed in just 20 seconds of sustained gunfire. To put that in perspective, that's 2 shots every second for 20 straight seconds. This isn't someone losing control or firing in panic. This is methodical, relentless, overwhelming force. Neighbors bolt upright in their beds, hearts racing. One resident later describes the sound like a war was going on outside. Another talks about the sustained nature of the attack. This wasn't a few quick pops that might be mistaken for fireworks or car backfire. This was unmistakably gunfire, and lots of it. The Escalade, riddled with bullets, comes to a stop. Inside, the Uber driver is somehow miraculously unharmed. Every single bullet seems to have been aimed at the back seat, at Tasha. The precision is terrifying. Dozens of shots fired and not one hits the driver. This wasn't random spray and pray. This was targeted execution. The attackers don't stop to confirm their work. They don't rob the vehicle or take anything from the scene. Having accomplished their mission, they disappear into the Atlanta night, leaving behind a crime scene that will haunt investigators and a community. The Uber driver, probably in shock, fumbles for his phone and dials 911. His voice, captured on the emergency recording, conveys pure terror and confusion. He tells the dispatcher that someone in his backseat has been shot, that he thinks she might still be breathing. The desperation in his voice is heartbreaking. This man has just witnessed something no civilian should ever see. But there's another 911 call that night, and this one reveals just how modern technology played a role in the discovery of the crime. Remember that friend who was tracking Tasha's Uber ride? When the car stopped moving and stayed in one location for far too long, he knew something was wrong. He contacted ADT Security, who in turn called 911 on his behalf. Think about that for a moment. Someone sitting miles away watching a ride-tracking app becomes the person who alerts authorities that a murder has just occurred. That friend didn't hear gunshots or see flashing lights. He simply watched a dot on his phone screen stop moving, and he knew his friend was in trouble. When police and emergency responders arrive at the scene, they find exactly what the 911 callers described. A luxury SUV turned into a crime scene, bullet holes covering the vehicle, shell casings scattered across the pavement. Tasha is found in the back seat, having sustained multiple gunshot wounds. Despite the driver's hope that she might still be alive, she has already succumbed to her injuries. The immediate response from law enforcement tells us everything we need to know about how they viewed this crime. This wasn't classified as a robbery gone wrong or a drive-by shooting. Police immediately labeled it a targeted incident and an ambush. They recognized what the evidence clearly showed. This was a professional hit. But here's what I want you to think about as we continue this story. What kind of threat requires 40 shots to eliminate? What kind of motive demands this level of planning, this degree of violence, this military-style execution? Drop a comment with your theory, because the more you learn about this case, the more you'll realize that the official answers simply don't exist. What we're dealing with here isn't just a murder. It's a mystery that challenges everything we think we know about motive, about justice, and about who becomes a target for this kind of violence. When law enforcement experts examine the evidence from Tasha Bruley's murder, they see all the hallmarks of a professional assassination. But that's exactly what makes this case so disturbing. Because professional hits usually leave professional evidence trails, and this one has led nowhere. Let's break down what the attackers did right from an operational standpoint. First, they conducted surveillance. They knew Tasha's work schedule, her transportation habits, and her route home. They positioned 2 separate vehicles for the attack, suggesting coordination between multiple teams or individuals. They chose their moment perfectly. A stretch of road where they could approach from multiple angles, where the target would be vulnerable, and where they could escape quickly. The timing was flawless. They struck when Tasha was in a confined space, unable to run or seek cover. They waited until she was away from the club, away from potential witnesses, but before she reached the safety of her home. The attack occurred in those vulnerable minutes when she was in transit, essentially trapped in the back seat of someone else's vehicle. Then there's the execution itself. 40 shots in 20 seconds requires multiple shooters firing simultaneously. This wasn't one person with a single weapon. This was a coordinated barrage designed to ensure the target had no chance of survival. Yet despite this overwhelming firepower, the Uber driver emerged completely unharmed. That level of precision, that ability to distinguish between target and bystander in the chaos of sustained gunfire, speaks to either exceptional training or exceptional luck. Crime experts who study assassination patterns recognize this methodology. Dr. Stephen Morrison, a criminal justice professor who specializes in organized crime, explains that this type of operation typically indicates one of 3 scenarios: professional contract killing, gang retaliation for a significant offense, or elimination of a potential witness to serious crimes. But here's where the case becomes truly puzzling. Professional assassinations of this caliber usually involve high-value targets, people involved in serious criminal enterprises, individuals with access to dangerous information, or those who have crossed powerful organizations. The level of planning and firepower suggests that whoever wanted Tasha dead considered her a significant threat. Yet nobody, not her family, not her friends, not the investigators, can identify what that threat might have been. This creates a profound contradiction. All the evidence points to a professional operation targeting someone of major importance, but the victim appears to have been an ordinary person living an ordinary life. Consider the resources involved. Multiple vehicles means multiple people. Multiple shooters means multiple weapons. The coordination suggests advanced planning, reconnaissance, and possibly even practice runs. Professional hits of this nature typically cost tens of thousands of dollars to execute. Someone spent serious money to ensure Tasha Bruley was dead. What makes someone worth that level of investment in violence? In most cases, it's because they pose a threat to something valuable: money, power, freedom, or reputation. They either know something they shouldn't, have something they shouldn't, or represent some form of competition or obstacle that can't be resolved through other means. But investigators have found no evidence that Tasha was involved in anything that would justify this level of violence. No drug connections, no criminal associations, no indication that she was blackmailing anyone or possessed dangerous information. Her social media accounts, her financial records, her personal relationships, none of it reveals a secret life that would explain why multiple people would want her dead. This is what makes the case so frustrating for law enforcement. Detective work relies on following logical connections between motive and method. When someone is killed in a professional manner, investigators look for professional motives. When they find none, it challenges everything they know about how these crimes work. The Atlanta Police Department has been remarkably transparent about their struggles with this case. They've publicly acknowledged that they have no suspects. They've admitted they haven't identified a motive. They continue to appeal to the public through Crime Stoppers, offering rewards for information that might break the case open. But here's what should concern everyone. The people who executed this attack are still out there. They demonstrated the capability to plan and execute a military-style assault in the middle of an affluent neighborhood. They showed they can coordinate multiple vehicles and shooters. They proved they can strike with precision and escape without being identified. If they killed Tasha for reasons that remain hidden, what's to stop them from striking again? If there was a motive, and there almost certainly was, that threat might still exist. Other people might be in danger without even knowing it. The technical competence displayed in this attack suggests these weren't amateurs. Professional criminals don't usually stop after one job, especially when that job goes perfectly from their perspective. They got away clean, leaving no usable evidence and no witnesses who could identify them. This case represents law enforcement's worst nightmare, a perfect crime with an invisible motive. The attackers succeeded completely in their immediate objective, but they left behind a community living in fear and a family destroyed by unanswered questions. Until someone comes forward with information, until a witness breaks their silence, until a piece of evidence surfaces that authorities haven't found yet, the professional killers who murdered Tasha Bruley remain free. And that's a thought that should keep all of us awake at night. The bullets that killed Tasha Bruley didn't just destroy one life, they tore through an entire community, leaving everyone wondering if they could be next. In Buckhead, a neighborhood where people pay premium prices for the promise of safety, residents suddenly found themselves looking over their shoulders, questioning whether their expensive zip code could protect them from the kind of violence that claimed Tasha's life. "It's becoming very scary to live here," one neighbor told reporters, and that sentiment echoed throughout the community. This wasn't just about sympathy for a murder victim. This was about the terrifying realization that if someone could execute a military-style ambush on Lindbergh Drive, then nowhere was truly safe. The attack had been so brazen, so public, so overwhelming in its firepower that it shattered any illusion of security that Buckhead residents had maintained. For a neighborhood that prides itself on being insulated from Atlanta's urban problems, Tasha's murder was a wake-up call that violence doesn't respect property values or gated communities. When multiple gunmen can unleash 40 rounds of ammunition in 20 seconds and disappear without a trace, it sends a message that even the most affluent areas remain vulnerable to those willing to use extreme violence. The psychological impact extended far beyond property concerns. Parents started questioning whether their children were safe walking to school. Professionals began thinking twice about late-night rides home from work. The randomness of the attack, at least from the community's perspective, made everyone feel like a potential target. At Allure Atlanta, where Tasha had worked, the grief was immediate and profound. Her colleagues didn't just lose a coworker, they lost someone they considered family. The club community organized vigils and memorial events, gathering to remember a woman who had been taken from them without warning or explanation. The images from these memorial services capture raw human emotion in its purest form. Colleagues releasing balloons into the Atlanta sky, each one carrying prayers and memories of a life cut short. Bella Lytle, visibly emotional during one memorial, represented the collective heartbreak of a community trying to process senseless violence. These weren't performances or publicity events. These were real people mourning someone they genuinely loved. What made the grief even more unbearable was the absence of answers. Typically, when someone dies violently, the community can eventually find some form of closure through understanding, even if that understanding involves terrible truths. But Tasha's murder offered no such resolution. Her friends and colleagues were left to mourn not just her death, but the complete mystery surrounding why she had to die. Perhaps no one was more traumatized by the experience than the Uber driver who survived the attack. This man, whose identity has been protected for obvious reasons, went from earning a living by providing safe transportation to witnessing an execution that will likely haunt him for the rest of his life. His 911 call, filled with shock and confusion, captured the voice of someone whose world had just been turned upside down. The driver's trauma represents something larger about how random violence affects innocent bystanders. He was simply doing his job, providing a service that millions of people use safely every day. But in 20 seconds of gunfire, he became an unwilling witness to murder. Someone who will forever be connected to a crime he never could have prevented. His experience also highlights the broader impact on rideshare safety perceptions. How many Uber and Lyft drivers now worry that their next passenger might bring danger into their vehicle? How many passengers hesitate before requesting late-night rides, wondering if they might be putting themselves and their driver at risk? The unsolved nature of Tayshia's case compounds all of these fears and traumas. When murders are solved, communities can begin to heal. When perpetrators are arrested, victims' families can start to find closure. When motives are revealed, even terrible ones, people can make sense of senseless violence. But unsolved murders don't offer any of these psychological benefits. Instead, they leave communities suspended in a state of perpetual anxiety. The threat that killed Tayshia remains active and unknown. The people who demonstrated such deadly capability are still free to strike again. The motive that drove such extreme violence remains hidden, meaning others might be at risk without knowing it. For Tayshia's family, this uncertainty makes their grief infinitely more complicated. They can't just mourn her death, they have to live with the daily reality that her killers walk free, that justice remains elusive, that the truth about why she died may never be known. Nearly 2 years later, these wounds remain fresh because they've never been allowed to heal. Every day without answers is another day of injustice, another day of fear, another reminder that sometimes violence wins and good people die for reasons that will never be explained. As we speak, Tayshia Bruleigh's case file sits in the Atlanta Police Department's Homicide Division, still marked as an active investigation. Nearly 2 years have passed since that May morning when 40 shots transformed a routine Uber ride into a crime scene, and the people responsible are still walking free. The statistics on unsolved murders in America are sobering. According to FBI data, approximately 40% of homicides go unsolved each year. And that percentage climbs even higher for cases that aren't solved within the first 48 hours. Tayshia's murder has now joined the ranks of cold cases, investigations that remain open but lack active leads or suspects. But cold doesn't mean forgotten, and this is where public attention becomes crucial. Some of the most famous solved murders in American history were cracked years or even decades after they occurred, often because someone finally came forward with information they had been keeping secret. A witness who was too scared to speak initially. A criminal who decides to cooperate with authorities. A family member who can no longer live with what they know. Public pressure and media attention play vital roles in keeping these cases alive. When communities refuse to let murders be forgotten, when victims' names stay in the public consciousness, it increases the chances that someone with crucial information will eventually break their silence. Tayshia's case has all the elements that make cold cases solvable. Multiple perpetrators mean multiple people who know what happened. Complex operations like this one typically involve planning sessions, weapon procurement, and escape coordination, all activities that require communication and trust between criminals. The more people involved in a conspiracy, the greater the chance that someone will eventually talk. Someone out there knows who killed Tayshia Bruleigh. Someone knows why she was targeted. Someone knows where the weapons are hidden, who planned the attack, who drove the cars, who pulled the triggers. That person might be watching this video right now. If you have any information about Tayshia's murder, no matter how small it might seem, please contact Atlanta Police or Crime Stoppers. Your tip could be the missing piece that finally brings justice for Tayshia and her daughter. And if this case has affected you the way it's affected me, please share this video. Keep Tayshia's story alive. Keep the pressure on her killers. Because the moment we stop talking about unsolved murders, is the moment those responsible think they've gotten away with it forever. Subscribe to True Crime Case Tapes for more stories about the cases that demand our attention, the victims who deserve justice, and the mysteries that law enforcement is still working to solve. Because some crimes are too important to forget, and some people too precious to let their killers escape justice. Justice for Tasha starts with remembering her name.